So hi there. So following the main event with industry testing is awesome. So hopefully not everybody runs out of the room. We'll try to make this interesting. My name is Stephanie Milner. I'm Director of Capital Markets and Securitization at Fannie Mae. And I have with me today Nick Bada, who is the Executive Director of MBS Product Management at DTCC. And I have Barbara Pack, who is VP of Securitization Policy and Investor Relations for Freddie Mac. And Barbara and I have been working together for many years now on a ton of industry outreach, trying to help all of you get ready for the single security. So it's been a few years, but it feels almost like half a lifetime. So we're going to kick this off, and what this is all about is in all of our travels, Barbara and I have been out, talking to the industry either through meetings and conferences. Is one of the questions that we get very often is, what kind of testing is going to be available, for your firms? And will we be able to test? And when will that happen? And so we started to look at ways, obviously a complete end-to-end test across the industry would not be possible, but we tried to look at different ways we could offer some kind of testing to parts of the industry. And then we also started working with the vendors on maybe they could start to be more transparent on what their testing looks like internally. Because we also get questions of like, okay, I use Bloomberg and I'm wondering what their test schedule looks like, or where is FICC on all of this? So we're just trying to get as much information as we can and be as transparent as possible in where different parts of the industry are in their journey in getting ready for the single security launch next year. So we do have a slide, presentation put together, and I'll try not to put you to sleep with it. But so there's a couple different ways that we're going to try to offer some kind of testing to the industry. And so first and foremost, we are not we because I'm from Fannie Mae, but Freddie Mac is going to have an exchange process testing with the dealers with their Dealer Direct product, which is the portal where you enter in the exchanges. So there is going to be more today about exchange. I know we've talked about exchange earlier today, so I'll kind of leave that to Freddie Mac to dig into the details, but that is one area of testing that will be available. Another very important area of testing is the disclosure testing for the new disclosure format. So Freddie Mac did roll out the new disclosure format in 2017. However, Fannie Mae has not rolled that out yet, and we will in connection with the go live of the CSP. And so for that, we will be offering disclosure testing to all of the data vendors who get their data directly from Fannie Mae today. So we will be communicating with them on what that process is, and they will have an opportunity to test those files. Also, when we go live with the CSP, the disclosure files themselves will be produced by the Common Securitization Platform. So there'll be testing involved with that as well. And then a third area, which I just touched on, is where we're trying to be transparent about where some of the vendors are in their process and with their testing schedule. And so we're starting to collect that data now. And then once we have more of it, we will put together a testing schedule for all of these large vendors and make it public. So Nick has so graciously accepted to come sit up here with us today. And I was going to ask him to talk a little bit about where DTCC is with their testing and sort of progress for single security.
So first off, I didn't realize it was an option to say no, but thank you anyway for inviting me. So we sat down with the FHFA and Fannie and Freddie more than 3 years ago. They came to us and started explaining to us about what the UMBS was going to be about, how they envisioned it being rolled out, et cetera. So our takeaway after they left was good news from a DTCC, more specifically FICC perspective, because at a high level, it meant that we didn't have to do a lot of internal work. Based on the way they were going to model the UMBS, it looked like it was going to fit into our platform very easily. At the time, we were really kicking off our whole innovation initiative. We've spent the last 3 years working with all of our members, the clearing members, to get that up and running. We went live towards the end of last year. So this is a good opportunity now to take what we learned in innovation and kind of move it towards single security. So as we look at a testing perspective, we'll both do internal as well as external testing. Again, the good news is since we just went through with Novation, we've got our testing protocol down internally. We don't envision a lot of internal testing that we'll need to do. But from a client perspective, we kind of look at two different trains of thought. One is our clearing members. The clearing members that tested with us through Novation went through a very rigorous scripted testing period. It lasted about 9 months trying to get everybody up and running. Again, the good news from a single security perspective, we don't necessarily envision it being that detailed. We have already started working on scripts that we're going to use with our clearing members. Very much similar to submitting trades, getting innovative messages back. We would run a TBA net with the UMBS to make sure that our members can accept that properly. The other train for testing that we're going to be looking at are our EPN-only clients. And a lot of those clients are the firms on the buy side who did not have to participate in Novation because it did not affect them. So testing with them will be a new situation. So for them, the test will be even simpler. It's really about being able to move the EPN messages back and forth between each other. And it's really be able to, can you put a UMBS into an EPN message? Can you mix it with a Fannie Mae pool also in an EPN message? Again, we've kind of started to script that out, and we think, again, it's going to be very simple. We do have a lot of EPN-only clients, so we'll be working with our relationship managers to get the information out to you guys to really kind of set that training and testing in motion.
Okay, thanks for sharing that. Just one more point on this page of the PowerPoint is another exercise that we will be embarking on later this year in Q4 is we are trying to put together some type of tabletop exercise where we invite some buy side, sell side, some vendors, and try to walk through some of the processes, especially with the exchange, of actually how some of the handoffs would work, knowing that from an operational perspective, it's, we can't really set up an end-to-end test, but maybe we can all sit down and talk about some different scenarios. Just so everyone's clear on how some of the mechanics will work. And Barbara is going to touch on that in a lot more detail here in a couple minutes. Just moving to the next page, this is kind of what I was talking about. This is sort of a preliminary from a few of the vendors that have shared some of this information with us, but showing you what we're building out and how we're going to share that so that you can understand where your vendors are in their sort of build and test process. So far here, we have Freddie Mac's key milestones, which just relate to when trading will begin, and then the exchange opens up, and then obviously the go live on June 3rd. And then so far, we've talked to EMBS, TradeWeb, Thomson Reuters that we have here about some of what are their key milestones going forward all the way to go live. And so we will continue to build this out and then start to share that with the industry more broadly. Moving on to the next slide, I think Barbara is going to get into a lot more detail on what we're thinking in terms of this tabletop exercise later this year.
Yeah, so let me actually, before I get into more details, Nick, do you want to talk a little bit about some of your timeline with FICC?
Sure. From an FICC perspective, I think we envision our clearing members coming in late Q3, early Q4 to start testing. I think as it's been mentioned earlier, they envision trading of the new UMBS to really pick up probably earlier in 2019 than we will be settling. And I think then the EPN-only clients, we're looking at really Q1 of 2019. And if need be, rolling into Q2 if necessary. Again, I want to emphasize, I think really the testing, especially for those of you on the dealer side that went through innovation testing, this will really be a walk in the park compared to what you had to do for Novation. But again, the EPN-only guys, since they will be new from their perspective for testing, we'll have to probably spend a little bit more time walking you guys through what we intend to do. So, but again, I think being able to get through it by the end of Q1, I think is a fairly easy task to accomplish, I think. So I think we'd be then ready to roll when we come to June with the issuance.
Okay, great. Thank you, Nick. Yeah, so this, the vendor testing timeline, we're going to go ahead and, it's going to be a living document. So we're going to go ahead and as we get additional dates that is more firm with each of the critical vendors, we're going to go ahead and update those and publish it into our single security website. And so for folks who hasn't been to our website, both Freddie and Fannie has exactly the same, a view of what types of resources that we have available. And this is one that we want to make sure that is transparent across everybody. So let me move on to the fourth sort of conceptual type of testing. So as we are meeting with investors, dealers, and vendors, one of the repetitive trends that we're hearing is, what kind of testing are you going to do? So again, we have talked about other testing, which is a direct feed testing, I think, with each of the vendors, and anything that is directly connecting with Freddie or Fannie. So that one is actually pretty easy that we can manage. But how do we actually think about doing sort of this end-to-end ecosystem of testing across the board? And so I think as we were talking with folks, they said, why don't we do like a BCP and this tabletop exercise? And so we have socialized this with various members, and we're in the initial stages of thinking through what type of scenarios. And this really, I'm taking this as an opportunity to ask for volunteers. So I'll talk about that a little bit later. But essentially, this is across various business scenarios of exactly if things go perfectly well, and then if something fails, what will we do? What is the sort of the data inputs and outputs? And we're looking across dealer community as well as investors and vendors and seller servicers who participate with us on this tabletop exercise. Okay? So why are we doing it? I think there's a lot of demand for this type of testing. And it's really depending on the request that we are going to get. It could be very extensive, but we are looking for potential issues of any kind of fail points. How should we address those fail points? So that's really the primary reason. Again, who it is touching, again, huge amount of industry participants across investors, broker-dealers, custodians, seller servicers, third-party providers, and of course GSEs who will participate. The timing of this, I think we are trying to see if we could kick off this a small group of folks on a monthly working group starting in July. So we do need volunteers as soon as possible. We're sitting in May. Freddie and Fannie will facilitate this, but we can't do this without the market participants. Okay. When and where, I think we are going to do a prep session leading up to it, but essentially it's going to be early fourth quarter is what we're thinking this will kick off. The location, we're thinking because a lot of folks are here in New York, so we're thinking New York, but we're open to other locations as well. Okay. This one's a little busy. And so for the tabletop exercise, again, I think the third item is probably the easiest. The exchange process, how would that work? And I actually do have some examples today of how will we actually do this testing. But forward sales, commingled securities, TBA trades, if we have to book the UMBS, how would that look different? And if there are any nuances that we need to worry about, how will we do this? Almost like a BCP type of scenario. Okay, so let me, as an example, and this is what we're saying from an ecosystem, and this is not even complete, right? So as we think about the original process of involving investors, and investors, when they're ready to go ahead and submit their exchange, they would take it to a dealer, and dealer would go ahead and input the transaction into this dealer direct, which later on we will have Freddie folks demoing the dealer direct tool. And then you have vendors, various vendors, including Aladdin Systems, Broadridge. We also have custodians engaged. We will have index providers, data vendors. So across the board, we're actually saying, what is the data inputs and outputs as we are handing off those information? So that's where we're kind of looking at across the board. And this is, we'll do a scenario where everything works out perfectly. And then we'll do different scenarios where there are fails, decays happening. How will we handle those transactions? Okay, and then let me just pass that on to Stephanie to talk about some of the high-level testing schedule.
Yes, so this is something you may have seen if you've looked through our materials before. We have various timelines, but this one, we've put out before. And this is just, trying to show at a high level, well, where the testing we just talked about in terms of the tabletop and the working group leading up to that, kind of where they're going to fall along with sort of some of these other activities. These are suggested timelines, right, for investment guideline updates, system updates, but just working our way back from the go live date, forward trading. This is sort of our suggestion on where a lot of the development and testing should lie within these different subgroups. So again, it's just a suggestion, but I think it's common sense if you're marching your way back from the June 3rd, 2019 go live date. There's Barbara's contact information. Thank God mine's not on there. So you can call Barbara with any questions.
Yeah.
And she's soliciting volunteers for the exercise.
Yeah, so if anybody's really interested in helping us with this end-to-end testing, here's my information, and I'm going to be here after the conference is done, so please stop by and talk to me, grab me, because we do need volunteers to make this thing happen.
So Barbara called me a few weeks ago to volunteer for the tabletop exercise as well. But we were discussing it, and she kind of threw out the idea. What did we think? Did this make sense? And my response was that at DTCC we do a number of tabletop exercises that we think are extremely important. It really gives us an opportunity to kind of discuss what's going on, keep the process fresh, right? Certain things like around a closeout of a defaulting member. That's not something that happens every day, thankfully. But it's a process that's extremely important to us, and we have to make sure that we are well in tune with the changes, right? So we just did Novation, and that really changed the way our MBS business works. So now we have to step away and okay, what kind of new questions does that open up, and what do we need to do internally to change the process? So we, when Barbara and I were speaking, I thought it was a great idea because there are so many different facets involved around UMBS. And we've heard a lot today about everything from the exchange to how it's going to operate from a trading perspective to how it's going to operate operationally, and the formation of the pools. So it's really, by putting together a tabletop, it really kind of gets a lot of people around the table in the room and kind of walk you from step one all the way to the end to see what are we missing, what's the obvious thing, right? I mean, I've been sitting there all day, and we feel like we have a pretty good handle on it, but every once in a while somebody says something, it kind of strikes a chord, jot down a note, that's something to follow up on. It might be something simple, but it could spiral into something a little bit more detailed that maybe we hadn't thought about. So by doing something along the lines of this tabletop, I think gives us the opportunity to kind of see, what are we missing? Are we missing anything? Do we think we've got it right? A lot of people have been saying they've been talking about this for 3 years, but based on the attendance here today, I think people are really starting to focus on it now. And I think something like a tabletop exercise would really give people the opportunity to kind of drill down into the details of it.
Okay, great. Thank you, Nick. Okay, so let me ask a couple of polling questions to see what kind of interest I get. So if you guys get your device out. So who will be interested in participating in this tabletop exercise? I hope everybody hits one.
Okay, you're good,
that's
Barbara.
good. That's really good.
That's very good. Okay, next one. Do you have plans in place to test with your key vendors? Kind of a similar question that we had. Getting there. Okay. I think those are all the questions, the polling questions. Do we have time for a couple of questions?
We have a few minutes. Does anyone have
Yeah.
any questions they want to ask?
Okay,
Right here.
Debbie.
We're here fighting over who's going to ask the question. I'm giving it to him. There are 4 options which are being explored. We had discussed them at SIFMA about 2 weeks ago. So for the tabletop testing, which one of those options will be included?
Depends on the option that we get chosen, and it could be hybrid. So we might actually have to do multiple.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I think 4 slides back where you had that flow showing the investor, I think
Sorry, I
the
didn't
asset manager, et
Can
cetera,
you click it back?
the various constituents who are involved in the testing, right before, next, oh, where is it?
This
Yes,
one?
they're right
Okay,
here.
yeah.
So the dealer, investor, Freddie Mac, and vendor. I didn't see the custodian. So is the custodian not included in
No,
the
they are
tabletop?
included. I just said it. I'm sorry. Yeah,
Okay.
it wasn't inclusive of everybody, but yeah, that's it. Yeah, custodians definitely included in this,
Okay.
as well as they're all the downstream vendors, including the data vendors and index providers, will be part of this.
Okay. All right, thanks.
All right, anybody else? We're good? Okay.
All right.
Thank
let's
you.
move this
Thank you.
along.